Well, I guess if we start with habit number one. Habit number one is be curious, not critical. Most of the challenges in relationships, or a lot of the challenges in relationships, come when we come up against somebody who is different to us, and we don't understand why they're being different. We think they should behave like we do. We think they should think, feel, and act the way that we do. I used to think that. I used to think, come on, Andrew, step up a little bit here. You're not doing things quite the way I do them here. Let's go, girl. What are you doing? Let's go. But when people don't step up to what we think is the plate, then our response is just to be critical. We end up saying, why don't you do this? We point fingers, you silly person, blah, blah, blah. That's what
You're
we're
lazy,
thinking.
you're sloppy.
We think it, and sometimes it comes out, and that doesn't work so well in a relationship. So actually what you say is you need to take time to understand yourself first and the other person, and actually understand that there are fundamental reasons why people do things differently. They think, feel, and act differently. And once we get that, we realize, oh, actually, you know what? There's a real difference here. And actually, some of the things that you do, they're not so bad. You got some good things going on there, which for me, that was my big realization, that Andrea had some strengths that I didn't have. And once I started to see those, then I could cut her more slack in the areas where I had the strength, and like, okay, come on, why can't you do this? Because I realized, actually, none of us is perfect here. She had some strengths, I have some strengths. Together, we realized we can actually form a great team. Because, if all of us have the same strengths, then let's face it, we're all, we're missing some gaps around us. But together, be curious, not critical is really about understanding all those differences and actually treasure hunting for strengths.
Yeah.
And working together.
So that you can anticipate behaviors, cut each other some slack. We talk about space and grace, don't we? We say give each other space and grace because we're wired differently. And if we don't do it right, that's what leads on to habit number 2, which is be careful, not crushing. And it really talks about how we turn up and deal with each other in a conflict situation. We're all wired to preserve ourselves, the fight or flight. We come out fighting. Most of the default ways of responding in a conflict situation are very me-centered. It's about protecting me and getting my way, or running away from it because it's all too much to deal with. And what habit 2 is about is learning how to turn up well in the conflict situation, taking care of each other, even through really intense arguments and debates, and coming out stronger because you've improved understanding rather than damaging the relationship in the way that you turn up. And that's what be careful, not crushing is about.
Yeah, and just I guess adding on to that, but for habit number 2, conflict is going to happen. Let's not kid ourselves about this. It's inevitable in any relationship. As we say, teams of 2 or 22, doesn't matter. Conflict at some point will happen. So you need to be ready for it. And our approach is we say, look, the battle is going to happen. So prepare for the battle, like a boxer going into the ring. You don't want to rock up there unprepared. Think about how you want to show up when conflict happens. So prepare for it. Be ready to fight fair during the battle, because in the heat of the moment, a lot of us end up doing things that maybe we're not so proud of after. So think about it before and try and control your behavior in the battle. And then after the battle, it's very, very important to restore the connection. Quite often we just sort of let things fizzle out and we just assume the relationship is going to be fine again, but it doesn't quite work like that. If these things that we all have called emotions and feelings are some funny things, we've got to really treat them with kid gloves and handle them with care. So,
it could be as simple as let's have a coffee and just talk about it. And what are we going to do differently now that we understand each other a bit better? We always say, make sure you learn the lesson. Whenever there's a conflict, you're differing on some issue, and the more fundamental the issue, the more important it is for you to come to some understanding. So what's the lesson learned? What are we going to do differently? Because if we don't learn the lesson, we're going to repeat the class. We're going to be doing that all over again.
And far too many of us do that.
Yeah.
And then habit number 3 is ask, don't assume. And that really it goes to our core values. Quite often you'll find that people in relationships over time tend to not quite settle into I guess they do. They settle into their routines of behavior. And they kind of assume that, well, in this relationship, this is the way it works, and this is what I'm going to do, this is what you're going to do. We sort of divvy up roles and responsibilities. Sometimes we do that proactively, sometimes we just kind of do it by default. And there's stories, messages playing in our head that say this is the way it should be, right? Either I saw this done by my parents or teachers or whoever there was around me, role models. This is how I've seen it done. This is how it should be. And it's only until you start to realize that actually not everybody sees the world the way you see the world. And you've got to have a conversation around that. Sometimes it's a tough conversation to have because the assumption is, look, that's just the way it should be, right? This is the right way to do things. And somebody else says, no, actually, there's a different right way. And you realize actually that there is no right way.
And because it's such a core belief, that's what makes it hard to have the conversation, because it will challenge our own assumptions. So an example with us, John mentioned roles and responsibilities, for example, in the home, especially now under lockdown. The assumption that we've had because for about 15 years, John worked outside of the home. He was the main breadwinner. I wanted to be home with the children. So I looked after everything to do with the house and the cleaning and the laundry and the cooking and so on. And then 3 years ago, so we had our home experience before lockdown. 3 years ago when we started the business, we both started working full-time on the business, but continued in the same assumptions about who would do what. So I was doing a whole day job and then having a whole another role to do in the evening. And it challenged both our assumptions. It challenged our assumptions. Well, I was getting resentful that I was carrying this lion's share of the household chores while everybody, we were both working neck and neck.
But let's be clear, I didn't have a problem with that. I was quite happy for her to do that.
But it challenged my assumption. It's really funny. It challenged my assumptions about what made a good wife and mother, because I was used to filling this role for so long. So I was resentful that it felt unfair, but I was also feeling vulnerable about giving it up, and what would that mean about me not being able to be super mom kind of thing. And this is what we mean by there are assumptions that we carry about the right way to be. And when they get challenged, it can be hard to talk about it because you don't know how it will be received, or if it will be understood, or how you'll be judged. And quite often, these are the things that people will sweep under the carpet. It could be the same thing in terms of how you feel about money, one's a spender, one's a saver. Really core values being challenged. How you feel about parenting, one's the disciplinarian, one's more relaxed. How you feel about in the workplace, what it is to be a good manager. It means, now the managers who think you have to be present and be visible, and I must be able to check up on all your work, that's the way to manage. They're kind of struggling right now because you can't manage that way and support people's well-being. And it's these assumptions that if you don't talk about them will cause stress and anxiety. So habit 3, ask, don't assume, is firstly identifying the fact that we have these core values and beliefs, figuring out what's important to you, having those courageous conversations to ask for what you need, rather than to assume the other person will just know automatically, which they never do. And that's the only way you can build relationships of trust and respect.
Yeah, I was going to say, by the way, it's very important to have these conversations and rehab these conversations in the different seasons of life, because life changes. And we've all just seen, we're going into lockdown, coming out of lockdown, you need to have those conversations again and again. So have those conversations, tough conversations sometimes, but it really makes a big difference when you do have them.
Ask, don't assume. That's what it's all about in every area of life. Yeah.
And then habit 4?
And then habit 4 is connect before you correct. I think by default, we're very good. It might be a cultural thing, but we're very good at telling people where they need to improve, giving that constructive feedback, showing them what needs to be better. But we're really lousy at connecting, building strong emotional connections on purpose. And habit 4 is about being intentional. There's a phrase that we like to use that says people go where they feel welcomed, but stay where they feel valued. And so we need to learn deliberate ways of communicating to people in a way that's meaningful to them, that says, I love you, I appreciate you, I value you, are an important part of my life, the work that you do matters. And it's different from recognition, isn't it?
Oh, completely different. I mean, the example we like to share in that context is there was a survey done a number of years ago, and I can't remember the actual timing of it, but they asked managers in an organization how good do we think as an organization? How good do we think we are at showing recognition to our people and really, caring for our people? And I think it was just over 50% of them thought, we're doing a great job here. Good for us. It would have been better if it was a higher number, but it was about 50%, just over. And then they asked in the same organization, the people on the receiving end of that, how valued do you feel? Is this the system that we have here? Is it working? And I forget the number. It was some 20%.
Like 17, 18%.
Of them said, yeah, we're doing well here. The rest of them, 80% of the firm basically was saying, you're not getting this right, guys. But half of management thought they were. Big difference between the two. And the difference really is recognition, I guess, is all about the job done and how well that has been done. Okay, you're thanking the person, but for a good job. Whereas value and appreciation is completely different. It's a nuance to it, but it's saying, good person, I like what you're doing. The job is interesting, but I value you as a person. You may have got it right or wrong. That's interesting. But you as a person, I think you're a great person.
If you think about it with teens in particular, that's where I suppose we earned our stripes, is learning it relating to our boys, because as teenagers, they're going through a very vulnerable period. They're kind of half child, half adult, peer pressure, lots of opinions going on. Who am I? Why am I here? All the questions that they might be feeling. And while they're feeling emotionally raw, it's easy to be on their case about tidy your room, get your work done. It's easy to criticize, but to do that at a time when they're already feeling vulnerable can cause them to spiral downwards in their self-esteem and their self-confidence. I think that's why there's so much tension in the home with teens, because we are so wanting to parent them well and produce them as great adults to the world that we can be on their case in it and not balance it with connecting with them and letting them know whatever happens, I love you, I value you, I'm here for you, and finding ways to enjoy what they enjoy. There's another saying, isn't there, that when children are young, you can take them places and tell them what they want to play with. When they're older, you need to go where they are to keep that connection and discover what they're interested in and show value by being part of that with them.
What's really interesting is that we all feel valued and respected in different ways. And there's some work that was done probably 20 years ago now that actually shows that even in a workplace setting, people want to feel valued differently. We were on a webinar recently, and somebody was saying, made a comment that, it's really good. I feel really valued when people
say thank you.
Say thank you. I get a lot of verbal feedback. That's really, really good. It really works. And why doesn't everybody do that? And we had to point out to them, actually, that only works for some people, because literally on the same call, there was somebody else saying, there are people who are always just, they're just saying thank you, thank you, thank you. It's kind of just, they overdo it. It's patronizing me. They overdo it. It doesn't really work for me. We said, actually, you know what? That is absolutely so true, because there are actually 5 different ways in which we all feel valued and appreciated, and they're called the 5 languages of appreciation. One of which is just a little bit of detail very quickly. But one is words. One is acts of service, is actually doing things for people. One is touch. In a workplace setting, you've got to be really careful with that one, but some people feel valued. Those are the high fivers and the fist bumpers, and people like that. They feel valued when they have physical connection. There is quality time, which is all about attention, and undivided attention. Mobile phones are a nightmare from the devil when it comes to that kind of thing. You want people's attention, and there's gifts is the 5th one. People want some sort of
like a tangible expression
of appreciation and value.
Yeah.
So what the point in habit number 4 is connect before you correct. It's about showing value and appreciation in a way that is person specific.
Yeah.
There is no one size that fits all.
Yeah.
And interesting, you've got to really watch out. Most of us try and show value and appreciation the way we want to receive it, and that doesn't work. Because if you have a different appreciation language, I've got to learn your language and speak to you in your language. Forget mine just park mine. I can't speak mine for now. If you happen to have the same one as me, great, but I've got to learn yours. That's how you show appreciation to people.